see you in Dubai and around technology, no less. I'm delighted that we're doing this session together, and we had a chance to speak beforehand as the two panelists. I think it's rare that somebody would think of fintech and then think about sustainable finance, but there's a great opportunity there. I spend about half my life in energy, and the definition of environmental social governance is very different in different parts of the world, from Asia to Europe to the United States. I'll bring this microphone very close to you. We're going to go through a couple rounds of questions, and would be delighted if you want to pick up off of each other and what you have to say. But one of the things I'd like to start with is the central theme of our session, and that is, Chea, how do we link the two together to design products as fintech begins to blossom, where there's actually a demand for people to want to do the right thing and pile money in sustainable finance? Is it early days on this? Are you thinking of this as the governor of the Central Bank of Cambodia to create products that will do this in parallel with the development of the sector?
All right, so, well, first of all, thank you to the host of this event, the DIFC, for inviting me here, but maybe just an introduction about where I'm coming from before I touch on your answer. So Cambodia, for many of you who don't know, is a country in Southeast Asia. We have about 40 billion in GDP, population of 16 million. We have a mobile phone penetration of about 20 million, so for 16 million population, so it's really immense. In terms of also our connectivity, we're part of ASEAN. We have about 600 million people in this part of the world. The country is connected. We have free trade agreement with all the 10 member countries of ASEAN. So that just to set the stage where I'm coming from.
You have a free trade agreement with whom, sorry?
The ASEAN itself is a free trade zone.
Absolutely. So it's a market of how big now?
Sorry?
What's the population in ASEAN?
It's about 600 million, but we're also part of many other free trade with other countries as well, and I think recently with the UAE. But back to your questions about sustainability, I think for me, I see two parts to it. There's sustainability in terms of the environment, but also there's sustainability in terms of livelihood. And it has been documented, well documented, about access to finance and how it can help reduce poverty, etc. So there's the World Bank report, there's the Asian Development Bank report, there's so many reports about this. So how do we sort of try to promote this access, right, to finance? I think technology definitely will help with all the AI and data-driven algorithm. It can help better identify projects or, projects that can help better promote the sustainability of the environment, but also help to better identify individuals who are credit-worthy to receive credit. I think that will be an important sort of catalyst to promote access to finance. The thing is how do we regulate these fintech and all these new players, because obviously it's not something that we're used to, it's new in the financial industry. We're used to banking, not conventional banking. We do a normal credit assessments where we go on site, we look at the people based on their collaterals, their pay slip, etc. But we're now in a world where we don't see the people, right? And so how do we balance this and make sure that there is, it's lent in a safe manner, because ultimately it's not the money of the bank owners, but it's depositors' money.
Yeah, it's a great point you're making, because you could define sustainable finance in very different ways, right? One is on the environmental front. Number two is for sustainable development and the SDGs and the targets to 2030. So it's good to bring so many more people into a banking system or into a financial system where they have access to capital, even if they don't qualify. It's quite different, Florian, for Austria, is it not? Because it's got a very high GDP. How do you think the government should define its role of how to create a sector? The fintech sector is taking off. Austria is a very good leaping off point for Central and Eastern Europe, both in transport, but very much so as the banking sector. How do you capture that and say, this should be the shape of it in fintech? And when you're in that role, what was the objective in that front?
I would like to add something on the discussion before. You know, Dubai and also Austria and my home region, Tyrol, has some things in common. Beautiful landscape, you have beautiful desert, beautiful sea, we have beautiful mountains there. And so we are also hosting conferences all the time, like you are doing here, this perfect conference. And when I went to office, I had a first big discussion with students in one of these conferences. And I was talking about the blockchain, I was talking about AI and all that stuff. And then an 18-year-old female student, last row, raised her hand and asked me, but what's about sustainability? What's about energy? What's about all the servers and so on? And then the whole day, we discussed about the so-called twin transition, the green transition and the digital transition. And there can't be a digital transition without a green transition, and there can't be a green transition without a digital transition. And I think that's all about. And it's also the same when we're talking about financial instruments, if we're talking about the fin sector. I think we have to focus that all we are working on, big data, data algorithms, AI, is about how to do it in a better, faster, and more efficient way. And we put that in the front line of our thinking about new financial products also for the government. For example, we created green governmental bonds. We were, I think, one of the first who were doing that in Europe. And then we opened these bonds to the public a few weeks ago. Everybody was able to sign up for these bonds. And in 2 weeks, 20,000 people, we only have 8 million, 9 million in our country, 20,000 signed for 250 million in 2 weeks. And that's a lot. And so I think the people are interested in such new sustainable financial instruments.
Good. How do we get the regulation right? So I'd like to pose this question to the two of you, because isn't there a balance? Because you said it's a tech-savvy society in Cambodia, but your role as a central bank governor is to make sure that there's a framework that's adhered to, but at the same time, you don't want to scare off the entrepreneurs that are trying to develop this sector. What's the framework you're trying to put in place? And then where do you get your inspiration, if I can suggest that, Governor? Are you looking within ASEAN? Are you comparing notes with regulations that you see being framed within the ASEAN region? How do you approach it? These are very directional, Mike, so bring that closer to you. Thanks.
So I think we have to be very pragmatic, although we're aware of what is happening in the region, but also around the world. We have to see what works in our country and what doesn't. And I think also in adversity, there is creativity, both for the private sector and the fintech players, as well as for the regulator. As a matter of fact, Cambodia is the first country in the world to introduce a functional payment system based on blockchain technology, and it's introduced by the central bank. And well, there's discussion whether this is the first central bank digital currency. For us, it's not the how you term it, it's how does it function, and for us, it's a blockchain technology, and so what it would allow is the interoperability between different banks, so customers from different banks can now pay each other or send money to each other through the QR code or phone number. And not only, we're now able to allow our user, our customer, or our people to go across the border and pay from their local currency account in Cambodia, in Thailand, and Vietnam, and in Laos. And we're now working with, also in China, we're working with other countries such as India, Japan, and South Korea. And this is important because the payment, the technology that allows such payment to happen is it's a domestic payment system. So instead of carrying Visa, MasterCard, going to pay across the border, they can just now pay from their own bank account using the domestic technology. And this is really significant. So if we were to be very restrictive in terms of, new introductions of technology, et cetera, we won't be here today. But being the first country, and I think, and I can proudly boast that we're quite pragmatic in our approach, trying the first, introducing the first blockchain technology in the world. So it's really, we have to take the leap of faith and try to see what use. And for me, really, it's not about the technology, it's not about who is doing what, it's about the functionality of it and whether it is useful to serve the people. And I think what we introduced, and it's called, if you're curious, it's called Bakong Payment System, BAKONG. It really helped connect people within the country. It helped bring people into the formal financial system when previously, when they need to do remittances, they have to use informal sector and have to pay exorbitant fee. Now they can use it through the formal sector. And this is, I think, the importance of technology, and this is what regulators should be looking at.
Great. What a fantastic story. How much people embrace the new platform, though, says a lot. Florian, you're part of the European Union, and there's this effort within the EU to have a common digital...
We are doing a lot of regulation.
Yeah, I know, that's the point. So I don't even have to ask the question because you know where I'm going with this, right? It's like they want to try to sweep everything into the Brussels apparatus to have harmonization. What does that mean about innovation, if you will, when it comes to Austria and the fintech sector?
That was the biggest discussion when we discussed over the last months and years the AI Act. How far we would like to go with regulation. But you have to think about that the major aim of the European Union is to come to a single digital market. We have a single market in the European Union. This was one of the biggest achievements of the European Union. But we would like to have a single digital market. And for such a single digital market, we have to have the same regulatory frameworks all over the European Union.
Is that possible? Is it?
We are making it possible right now with the Digital Service Act, the Digital Market Act, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, the EI Act, the EIDAS Act, for example, about the digital licenses and all that stuff. And everything is about the aim of this single digital market. But for sure, we have to think about how we can also make the right environment for innovation. And so, for example, in Austria, I think you have discussed it a few hours ago with a colleague of mine. For example, for the fintech sector, we started a regulatory sandbox only for the fintech sector, so that it's possible also for innovators from Austria to build up the companies in Austria. And we are very proud, for example, Bitpanda is also attending this conference. It's a unicorn from a fintech unicorn from Austria, and we are very proud that that is possible even in Austria, even for sure in a regulatory framework which is pretty tough.
Okay, let's go a step deeper if I can, and I'll bring the governor back into the conversation as well. There's the legacy banks that have had their way, and you suggested the Austrian banks, they've been in dominant positions. How is the mindset in the country? Is the banking sector modernizing to embrace fintech or not? Do you want to start there, Chea, yourself, in terms of, are they open to this? Because it's a very bright population that's kind of hungry, and you said there's a whole scene percolating in fintech in Cambodia today. How do you balance the two as a regulator?
So I would say that we are somehow lucky because we have started all this sort of vibe about fintechs and blockchain, all this come about, in the past 10 years or so, maybe a bit more. And our financial system is actually very young. For the year 2000, we don't have before 1999, we didn't have a banking law. And so it was a bit sort of Wild West in the country. And obviously we had, very long and bitter history of genocide and civil war, etc. And so really the country started to sort of open up, really developing since 1998.
Yes.
So for us, when we didn't have to face with strong bank who resist all this. And so it was easier for us to bring them into sort of the development stage of our payment system. But it's also important, I think, for regulator to be very transparent about what we want to do and what we want to achieve. and listen to the private sector, because I mean, a payment system like ours, the one that the central bank is introducing, can very well kill the payment system that was offered by the commercial bank or the payment service provider. But we were very clear from the outset what we wanted to do and what were the risks, but we needed them to come along. And everyone sort of agreed, and I said, well, there are currently 50 of yours. Eventually, you have to accept there will only be 20 surviving. That's reality. You either embrace it, or there are probably none left. Right? So we were very honest and very straightforward, and I think dialogue with the private sector is very important. We used to think about regulator as, you know, the super institution who knows everything.
The ivory tower.
And that's, yes, and that in the past, it's when I was raised by my parents, they were very strict and they tell me exactly what to do, where to study, etc. I don't think I can do this with my children because the level of information they have access now is a lot more than what I've accessed in my time. And so the same thing goes with the private sector now. I think they know a lot more than us. They have much more resources than the regulators themselves. We can't afford to hire, you know, the big tech guy to come and help us figure out what is going on, the modelings and all this and that. I think, but the private sector can afford to do that. And so we should work with them, we should listen to them, we should have a frank dialogue, and they should understand that regulator has a mandate and mission. Our mandate and mission is financial stability, price stability. Their mandate is to make money for their shareholders. Fine enough. Let's work together and figure out something that can benefit both of us.
Okay, I don't want to skip over this, but either your parents were very open-minded or you were quite a rebel. You should share with the audience where you did study. At the end of the day, you went around the world. Where did you study? So you brought that experience to Cambodia.
Yeah, I'm quite a rebel. I studied in France, so sort of grew up half of my life in France. And then, well, no, not life, but childhood in France. And then Singapore, and then New Zealand, UK, and Australia.
Okay, so they did let you fly away and do your thing.
Yes, so I was a rebel.
I have 2 daughters. I don't want them complaining afterwards you didn't give us opportunity. You've done well, extremely well. Florian, if you look at this audience, and I find it fascinating, I have a friend that's sitting in the front row with the shirt, right, executive. And then there's the suits also in the front row, right? And I find it fascinating that in this FinTech hub, you have both. And it's analogous to the people that are in the business, the traditional bankers, the regulators, and then the entrepreneurs. And you have a mindset about this in Austria because there's a legacy, a history, a culture. Are they two seen eye to eye, and can you have them grow together, in your view? You had this viewpoint in digitalization as a minister in government.
Let me start like that. In Germany and Austria, a lot of people still love cash. But
That's
bank,
not the answer I was expecting, but it's
I
very
know,
interesting.
but I think it's a bit of core of the thing. When the first online banking solution were brought up, everybody in Austria and Germany told us, I won't ever use it, I love my cash, and I would like to go to my banking guy and discuss with him. But then our banking sector was really driving innovation and digitalization forward in Austria because they had to make it usable. They put the usability in front. And so everybody was using it. But the problem you were talking about is that we have a very old and traditional administration coming from the emperor and so on. We have the same in Germany and in Austria, and it's not easy to build up a digital world on such a traditional governmental framework. And that was my key challenge in my years in office, how to tell the people you can't do it in the digital area like you did it hundreds of years in the past. And that's exactly what you were talking about. That's the big gap between the sneakers and t-shirt guys and the suit guys in administration.
Good. So how did you tackle it? Were you able to make progress in that capacity?
I was the nice guy who were talking about solutions, what could be possible in the future, and yeah, but it's quite hard work every day, and you can't do it in one day or 1 year. It's a development.
Good. I would like to raise another issue here, because if you want this sector to be sustainable and have an impact, for example, on the lower third of society to make sure they have the access to transactions, if you're trying to develop a sector that has a legacy banking history, how do you attract the right talent? Or in the case of Cambodia, how do you prepare society and train them? You said they're very tech savvy, but how do you start to set up an institutional framework for education so you don't have to go outside the country for talent? Have you given that thought, Chair?
Yeah, so the government new mandate, what we call the pentagonal strategies.
What's it again? One more time.
Pentagonal.
Pentagonal strategy.
Pentagon.
Yes.
The different angle to this policy, and one of it is education. And I think we need to really figure out where we want the country to be in 10, 20 years and design the education system accordingly. But I don't want to go a bit too far from the sustainability part. I just want to touch on something that was mentioned about how do we get the financial system to participate in this effort. Obviously, we live on one earth. It's like a boat, and if there's a hole on your end of the boat, it doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen to me and I can sit and wait. Everyone plays a role. And even though Cambodia is a low emitter of CO2, but we have done our part to participate as well. So as the central bank, for instance, we do invest in green bonds. For instance, bonds that was issued by the BIS or the European country, we buy it. The only problem is that I am coming from a developing country where I do need funding to fund my own transition and adaptation, climate adaptation efforts. But because of the rules, I can't invest my foreign exchange reserve in the country. Right? We can't invest our money in a domestic country, otherwise it won't be qualified as a foreign exchange reserve by the IMF. Oh. And so we have to invest it outside. And in a way, it's like we, smaller country, funding the transition effort of the developed country. And so I think that there should be a way where we can, there should be a mechanism where we can do a swap arrangement with the country and try to get that funding back to our country as well. For instance, well, it's easy for a country of the same level of sort of rating. For instance, if Cambodia and Austria were to be on the same credit rating, which we are not, obviously, I can buy your bonds, green bonds, and then you invest back in my country, and the investment that I made can still be qualified as foreign exchange reserve. You do the same for the bonds that I issue, and I invest it back in your country. So this kind of arrangement could happen. I mean, of course, it needs a lot more study, something that I try to sort of promote and publish. And I published an article in The Banker last week about this proposal as well, and I hope it works to try to get central bank to do more beyond just talking and encouraging others to do, but we can do something ourselves too, because we have that fund, that's foreign exchange reserve as well, particularly for developing country. We've been able to accumulate a lot of foreign exchange reserve, but we're not able to invest it back in our country.
That actually almost seems ridiculous. I'm going to come back with one final question about, isn't it the role of the World Bank and the regional development banks? I was sitting on a panel last week where we had a $1 trillion investor that said I would go into Indonesia, for example, and do renewable projects, or Cambodia, if you had the right instruments for the different investor needs. Why is that moving so slowly? And then I'll finish with Florian. It's moving slowly, is it not, Che?
I mean, there's so much criteria. You talk about, I mean, you have to look at it as a subsistential crisis and not something that you have to get your return back. And if you were to stick to the criteria the same way you stick to the criteria for, a normal investment asset class, then you would never be able to meet, and particularly you're talking about developing country, we would never be able to get the AA rating of a developed country. And so this is a reality, and I think investors really need to set their priority or reset their priorities, because it's no more about, getting your return back. I'm not saying that this should be a philanthropic fund. You should get some return, but don't set too high expectation. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we'll live on the same boat. And if there's a hole on my end of the boat, it doesn't mean that you're going to be safe. We'll all sink eventually
No,
together.
one of the ideas was brought up, like the Asian Development Bank or the African Development Bank in those
They-
instances
and they
should serve
should.
as guarantors, though, right?
Yes. Well, they should be playing that role. But again,
you.
it's to get the investors to be willing to accept.
Well, it's chicken and egg. Some of the times,
Yeah.
they would like to have that guarantee before they go in,
Yes.
right? And I think that could be the defining role when it comes to sustainable development in this space. Florian, I asked that question about talent. You have a really good university system. Is it adapting to the potential of fintech to make sure that there's not a shortage of talent in this sector for it to blossom?
We have a shortage of talents. We have a really big lack of workforces in Middle Europe, also in Austria. We have super universities, that's true. We have also, all in all, a very good system, but we have too less people in the future. And so also, when it comes to digital skills, our aim has to be to bring everybody in the population to his own digital skills. And we started a digital skill initiative where we were able to train over hundreds and thousands of workshops, normal people in digital skills, because they need these digital skills also to be part of the society in the future. And there will be a digital gap in the future, and we have to close that with digital skills. And so I think that's one of the most important things also for governments to set up these frameworks. And for sure, there is also a lack of specialized workforces in that field, and we have to focus more, especially to come to more female IT specialists.
Yeah, it's perfect. We have 2 minutes left, so 1 minute for each one of you. I'd love to find out how you came to Dubai FinTech, and do you see collaboration? Same question to Florian. You talked about Austria being nearly the same size. It's a small, fast mover. Che, do you want to finish here? What do you see as collaboration with Dubai or the UAE? You said there's the trade agreement that's underway now.
Well, I think Dubai is a big hub. I mean, from the east, from the west, you've got Dubai in the middle. That makes it a very interesting place to get people together and discuss. I came here by the invitation of the governor of the DIFC when I met him at the Singapore FinTech Festival, which is another big FinTech festival in Asia. And I do see, and then I walked around here, I do see there can be a lot of collaborations. There are things that work in this part of the world, but could also work in ASEAN. And, we live in a world where, we all become one. And so we need to really share our knowledge, try to see whether we can harmonize any rules and regulation, particularly in terms of remittances. I mean, here there's so many migrant workers from Asia, from the Philippines and so on and so forth. I mean, how can we make it cheaper and more affordable for them to remit money home?
Yeah.
So definitely I can see a lot of collaborations.
Great. Last word to you, Florian. Thanks.
Thank you. The last time I was here was at the World Governmental Summit, and I signed with Sultan Al Ulama an agreement between Austria and the Emirates about artificial intelligence. And I'm very proud and very happy that I was able to return today and see that there are a lot of Austrian speakers here, a lot of participants, and also a lot of Austrian companies. And I think that's the perfect way to start new and better collaboration between our two countries.
Good. Just very quickly, you're both small. Does that make you more nimble to react to the new technologies? They just announced an AI initiative last week.
I hope so.
You hope so. That's as short as I want because we're out of time. So you have an eye on the clock. A delight to have you both. You covered
Thank
a
you.
lot
Thank you.
in our 25 minutes. Can we have a nice round of applause for the governor of Cambodia and the former minister from Austria? Thank you very much. I know they want to take